Holy shnikes. Well, in my last video, I rather optimistically talked about where I think the country ought to be heading, and things, I guess you could say, took a turn for the worse. And, just more generally, of course, I'm referring to Syria, but I want to really explore the dark influences of money in politics and other barriers in place on the middle class. Yeah, but I mean, of course, it's kind of the elephant in the room at this point, where um, the airstrikes in Syria are basically pushing the country closer and closer to war, and there will inevitably be a rant in this video about Syria. If you want to skip to that, go towards the end of the video. But yeah, I want to cover some other broad topics first. Um, and yeah, I mean, like I've been over this before, but like even though there's so much corruption in this two-party system, I believe that we have to work within the two-party system. And some people, they differ with me, and they want to start a third party, and they want to do the Green Party thing or the Democratic Socialist thing. That's fine. I mean, I think that that's more of a good thing for a local approach, and that's more effective that way. But when it comes to the presidential aspect of it, I think it's just woefully inadequate because funding is a problem. Like you're just not getting as much funding as the Republicans or the Democrats, and that's just a fact. And I mean, yeah, we should be moving towards a system that's more relying on grassroots funding. I agree with that aspect of it, but the reality is like that's not what's happening now. So, um, I mean, and with Justice Democrats, of course, like their whole thing is to not raise money from corporations or billionaires, do completely grassroots. It's pretty bold approach, but ultimately it's still under the guise of the Democratic Party, and they will have that name recognition, and if they're very successful in finding candidates to run for Congress and maybe even a presidential candidate down the line, the Democratic establishment, that's what it will become, hopefully, if it's that successful, which is a big miracle. But yeah, the main point is like the funding is a problem. Not being on the ballot in all 50 states is a problem if you're third party. Not getting into the debates is a problem. That was a big topic of discussion with Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. They couldn't get into the debates, and Gary Johnson like almost eked it out. Excuse me, but unfortunately was not able to get in. Um, so some of these other problems that we see though with money in politics is actually this isn't necessarily specific to money in politics, but it's a problem with basically the divide between the ruling class and the working class is gerrymandering, which is a very common practice in Congress. And like the textbook definition of it is to manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party or class. And it's something that I think not a lot of people really know about, and like probably even fewer really understand what it is. I mean, I know I have kind of trouble understanding exactly how it works, but like this is from Washington Post that I pulled. So in my state, actually, of Pennsylvania, Democrats won 51% of the popular House vote in 2012, but they only won 5 out of 18 House states, fewer than one third. This was because when Pennsylvania Republicans redrew the state's congressional districts, they made highly irregular districts. So basically, there's a difference between what's a district more or less geographically and how you might know your cities and towns where you're from. There's a difference between that and what's a congressional district and who represents that. So every I don't know exactly how often they redraw the map, but every so often, basically, they redraw it, and it's from what I understand, a lot of times it benefits Republicans. In this case, clearly it did. Um, then, even going more broadly now, things like think tanks, people don't really know much about, and these are things that aren't necessarily bad by in and of themselves, but there's a lot of shady practices that go into think tanks, and these are people that are extremely wealthy, usually billionaire types like the Koch brothers, and they fund people that are connected to right wing radio, like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck, and that's why like these people they probably have like 14 freaking listeners in the whole country, but they're propped up by this house of cards, this billionaire class that wants to get their ideology out there. And from the wealthy standpoint, I don't think they really care that much about the ideology so much. They want to push for policies that are just going to benefit them, and make sure that they get all the money that they possibly can. They're greedy, and the conservative mindset wraps around this whole idea that government shouldn't basically be doing anything, and it should be like practically no taxes. That's if you're a libertarian, I guess. But like the Cato Institute is a libertarian think tank, and they have a significant swing in our politics. The Heritage Foundation is another one. And fun fact, by the way, Heritage Foundation wrote papers for the individual mandate system, which is Obamacare. And this is, this is actually a big scandal, or it should be, but no one ever talks about it, is that Obamacare is a right-wing plan. It was known as Romney Care when Romney was governor, I guess, or maybe mayor, I don't know. I think he was governor, though, of Massachusetts. So... oh yeah, American Enterprise Institute. This was a huge thing with the War on Terror. This think tank included people of the likes of John Bolton, and they're made up of neocons, and even to this day they're still pro Iraq War. Wrap your head around that for a little bit, but like. This is what happens. They have these think tanks that essentially they send people that work for them, and they a lot of times end up going to work for the president. John Bolton was on George W. Bush's cabinet. Super PACs is another problem, which what that is essentially like this organization that raises money for candidates, but the whole thing is there's supposed to be no coordination between the people that run the super PAC and the candidates. And this has just been proven to be false. The big problem with our campaign finance system and election system is that there's very little actual corruption laws, and the ones that are on the books, they're like never enforced. So I know from WikiLeaks they found some coordination between Clinton and her super PAC. I also know Ted Cruz was caught doing this, albeit in a more or less benign way. What happened was the people from the super PAC would coordinate with Ted Cruz and his team, and they'd go out and film Ted Cruz speeches, and then they'd use those speeches to make ads with. And then they said, "Oh, well, we're just private citizens, going to the thing." Yeah. So what's another thing that we should look at? Lobbying and the revolving door. That's a nice one. So what lobbying is you work for a corporation and you talk to people in Congress, usually, and just politicians in general, and you're trying to get legislation that's going to benefit the corporation. Essentially, it's all in the efforts to make corporations benefit more through government. I honestly like, okay, my stance on this is that there has to be communication between politicians and business people. It's not like, because that would just be chaos if there was like zero communication. But this dynamic that corporations can just go in and influence policy is kind of asinine, to be honest. I mean, it's quite literally an oligarchy where, because like, can I hire lobbyists to go and get legislation passed that's going to benefit me? I'm sure I probably can, right? But do I have the money to do that? No. So if you're a wealthy enough person, you can get legislation that's going to benefit you, and that is an oligarchy. And oh yeah, the revolving door aspect of it is that a lot of times people go to Congress and then when they leave, they become lobbyists. So you see how this starts to become kind of like an inner circle of elite people that you're like, oh yeah, like I knew you when you were in Congress. Now you're a lobbyist. Hey, maybe I'll help you out, and all this things. Campaign contributions, yes, from individuals. Betsy DeVos is a great example because she gave like 200 million to the Republican Party and ended up as the Secretary of Education, right? So, of course, it's completely classless of me to say that there's any connection between those two facts. But, I mean, let's be real here. As Bernie Sanders said in her hearing, she would not be in the position that she was in, that she's in now, if she hadn't given that money, if she wasn't a billionaire. Campaign contributions from billionaires, I mean, they just mean more than if I were to contribute $27 to Bernie Sanders. Because the billionaire people, the, and just wealthy people in general, like this is what politicians, a lot of their job is based around just courting big money donors, and that's so that they can win for re-election, because more often than not, the more money you get, the more often you will win. So this is a system that's built around legalized bribery, and it wasn't always like this. Let's be honest, like, this started a lot in the late 70s. There were a few Supreme Court cases that were a detriment to this. The pretty famous one, which was in the late 90s or early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken, was Citizens United. And basically what that said was that money is speech. So take it for what it is. It's just, it's honestly ridiculous that we could think in those terms. Money is speech. Well, then, by definition, rich people have more speech and are louder, and I guess their voice matters as a result. Which as I've went through, that's kind of what we live in right now. And just meddling in global politics has real world consequences, and Trump and a lot of his team are shaking things up. And maybe you could argue in certain cases that that's okay for him to do, I guess, but we're all just kind of realigning across the world. All these countries are kind of taken aback by what to do with Trump, and it's kind of scary to see that this is where we're heading now. Like, we were never a democracy, but there was this notion that you don't really go against the American people and the will of the people. This is why, I'll get to Syria later, but this is why Obama said he wouldn't attack Assad, is because he was trying to respect the democratic will of the people, and there was no support for war in Syria. And now that might be changing, but we'll get to that. We're seeing a shift from our established order of things, and the wealthy want to concentrate their wealth and power more. And so here are some examples of that. There was a recent bill that I believe Trump signed, if I'm not mistaken. If he hasn't signed it, he will most certainly sign it. Um, it has to do with internet service providers being able to sell your browser history to the highest bidder, whoever wants it, basically. And these bidders are likely to be corporations that sell products, right? And they want to know. I can imagine a number of reasons why they would want our browser data. They want to know who to advertise to. It gives them an unfair advantage, and it's all under the guise of, oh well, now they're like on the like playing field of Google. Um, well, I mean, even if I'm going to buy into that argument, like, what is exactly the problem? Because the whole problem with this is that it's not just that they can sell it; they can do it without your permission now. Like it used to be, you'd have to ask for permission. Now they can just the Comcast, whatever it is, they can sell your internet history and not ask, and you would just never know. Well, I mean, that is just not a pro freedom argument, is it? And the Republicans scream all the time, tyrannical government, tyrannical government. Well, we just saw tyrannical government when they voted to let our privacy be breached. And I mean, it comes as no surprise because the internet service providers paid a lot of money in campaign contributions to Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, who got like $200,000. And this is, of course, it's going to be abused. Of course. I suspect it may even be harder to speak out and dissent from the government as a result of this because, I mean, honestly, what corporations are going to be buying this stuff? Is it going to be just people that are selling Coke or soda, whatever? I don't think so. I think there will be, much shadier corporations that want access to our internet history, and it could be feasibly done, I think, under the guise of something that looks normal. So I'm very worried about that. And speaking about free speech, protest laws in 19 states, 19 different states. And this is from TruthDig. I just want to go over the list. It's not terribly long. So the Arizona State Senate in February voted to expand racketeering laws to allow police to arrest anyone involved in a protest and seize their assets, treating demonstrators like organized crimes. So let's pause for a second. Seize their assets. This is actually an even bigger problem than just protesters. This is called civil asset forfeiture, which is essentially the cops robbing you for, it's often done for drug crimes. So if you get caught smoking weed or whatever it is, and they seize your money, seize your anything that belongs to you, they can take that and say whatever they want. Oh, it's evidence. I don't know what it is, but they won't give it back to you. Excuse me. And it's just theft. It's legalized theft. And it's a way. It's, I guess, a way for the state and the government to make extra money. Well, first of all, I mean, obviously, I am for ending the war on drugs and legalizing weed and decriminalizing all drugs. But how is it any of the state's business to take my money because they say, oh, that's going to be used for a drug purchase or whatever? Well, if you're taking my money, like, how am I supposed to, live? How am I supposed to, that's my money that you could be potentially taking, and I might need that for any purpose, for food, to pay rent with. I mean, all these things. And they're saying, no, we have to basically preemptively stop you because you might be a drug addict. So going back to this list, Portland, Oregon activists organizing against police killings of black men, white nationalist politicians, and the countless systems of racism throughout our local, state, and federal governments are now considered domestic terrorists by Department of Homeland Security. In January, North Dakota Republicans proposed legislation to legalize running over protesters if they are blocking roadways. The legislation failed for now. Um, I mean, I thought that like looking at that, it's like they don't care about what you think. If you're blocking a roadway, I mean, people have mixed feelings about doing that. And I do too. I mean, like I tend to be on the side that like people need to be aware and they need to get more active. I understand though, like if you are working a minimum wage job and need to get to work, I understand that, but you shouldn't have the right to freaking legalize. You shouldn't be running over people. It should go without saying, but in 2017, I have to say no. You shouldn't run over people. Missouri lawmakers want to make it illegal to wear a robe, mask, or disguise. Remarkably, a hoodie would count to protest. And this is, probably under the guise of safety concerns, and they're worried that someone's going to commit a terrorist attack. Well, no, not necessarily. Sometimes people want to hide their identity from cops and just from people in general. They feel that by being more politically active, they're putting themselves in danger. And I mean, this is kind of true. I mean, the NYPD, I just read, infiltrated Black Lives Matter. So speaking out does come with a cost, and we're beginning to see that more and more. I mean, this has kind of been a problem under Obama a little bit, and I don't necessarily think it was his fault. I mean, like this, none of this is really coming from Trump. It's coming from the states, but it shows you that Republicans are being emboldened now to crack down on people that want to speak out. In Minnesota, following the police shooting of Philando Castile, protests caused part of a highway to shut down. Then at the beginning of the state legislative session, Minnesota legislators drafted bills that would punish highway protesters with heavy fines and prison time, and make protesters liable for the policing costs of an entire protest if they were individually convicted or of unlawful assembly or public nuisance. Republicans in Washington state have proposed a plan to reclassify as a felony civil disobedience protests that are deemed economic terrorism. Lawmakers in North Carolina want to make it a crime to heckle lawmakers. Now that's just hilarious, isn't that? People go to town halls, right, and they're upset and they want to show that they're upset and they want to get their message across, and then to heckle lawmakers. Well, I mean, first of all, I guess by heckle they mean call them names or whatever. You know what? Bullshit. Like, you're an adult. You know what? You can handle a few bad words thrown at you. You don't have to run to your safe space and make some arbitrary rule that's going to stop people from cursing at you. You know what? Fuck off. In Indiana, conservatives want to allow police to use any means necessary to remove activists from a roadway. Any means necessary, huh? Starting to sound like Malcolm X, except like in the opposite direction. Colorado lawmakers are considering a big increase in penalties for environmental protesters. Activists who tamper with oil or gas equipment could be under the measure face felony charges and be punished with up to 18 months behind bars and a fine of up to $100,000. And lastly, a bill before the Virginia state legislature would dramatically increase punishment for people who unlawfully assemble after having been told lawfully to disperse. Those who would do so face a year in jail and a $2,500 fine. So this shows you that they're not interested in dissent. And I've heard people say, like, oh, it's only violent protesters. They don't care about if you want to go out and protest and do this and do that. Well, I mean, there's kind of a point to be made that, just going on a sidewalk and just holding up a sign in front of a building is not going to be enough. you have to kind of disrupt people in order to really get a change across. And, again, I understand the economic terrorism, if you want to call it that, argument. But look, there are very important things going on across the globe right now, as I'll get to. But that's exactly why we need more action and we need more disruption, I think. I mean, and this idea that like the Republican lawmakers are not disrupting and want to take away your health care, like this is absurd. So I'm gonna jump to foreign policy now, and here comes the Syria rant that I was foreshadowing before. So let's go over the facts, and we'll see what we can get from that. Trump ordered a airstrike on Syrian airfields that I guess had Russian people on them, and Trump supposedly coordinated with Putin to make sure that no Russians would be killed in the strike. That's kind of to be determined. I've heard some people saying, particularly the Syrian government, that like soldiers were killed, 6 soldiers. That's neither here nor there. Um, I mean, not really, because it could be a pretty serious offense for us if we actually killed, soldiers. But let's put that aside, basically, for now. Um, this is a debacle, and it's exactly the Iraq 2.0 that the neocons and the military-industrial complex wanted. And we're going on to essentially the brink of World War III when it comes to Russia over these chemical weapons attacks in Syria. So this is like a proxy war for World War III. That's how I kind of view it. So these chemical weapons attacks have been going off and on for Assad. He's supposedly behind him, and he's been doing this for 7 years. And in the meantime, we kill thousands of civilians with drone strikes, thousands. Under Obama too, and leading up till now, Trump upped drone strikes by 400% and killed 200 people in Mosul, 200 plus. Trump is a thin-skinned buffoon and is probably being manipulated. I mean, like, this was all supposedly because he saw photos of the chemical weapons attacks on TV, and that perturbed him so much that he had to call this airstrike. Well, okay. If you're really that concerned about Syrian children being attacked, wouldn't you rescind your refugee ban? And let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say, okay, rescind the ban when it comes to Syria. He did it for Iraq already. Let's do it for Syria, since you care so much about the civilians there. Will you do that, President Trump? I don't think you will. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but we'll see. Another aspect to this is actually a corrupt aspect. Trump has connection to a company that makes Tomahawk missiles, the same kind that we, lobbed over into Syrian airspace, into their fields. The company is Raytheon, and this has been reported by Business Insider going back to 2015. So it shows, Trump actually personally benefited from this, because after the attack, their stocks went up. So what is the policy goal of all this? Okay, the standard for attacking, anybody, but this was a government target. This was the Syrian government that we essentially attacked. The standard is supposed to be that we are defending national security. And on top of that, there has to be some semblance of a escape route. Escape route meaning we're not just going to go willy-nilly into a situation and then not know where it leads. We have to have a plan that's going to ensure that we'll win. This is what Marco Rubio actually said on the debate floor during the election, and now he's cheerleading Trump for this. And there's no plan. That's the whole thing. That this is an even bigger debacle than Iraq, and mostly because Russia and Iran are involved in this. So they're getting us involved into this. There's just no the plan. You want to know the plan? It's according to Nikki Haley, regime change. Yeah, that old chestnut. We're gonna somehow oust Assad, and that's not going to allow terrorists to rise up and take advantage of the power vacuum. Look, so Syrian civilians were very happy that Trump did this attack because they hate Assad and he's done horrible things. I mean, because look, Syria, the Syrian forces and Russia have been killing civilians too. We're not the only ones guilty of that. So they hate Assad. But I am concerned about this because this will most likely only escalate things and only lead to more war. So that's not going to be good for the Syrian people. And I think it's mostly a temporary moment of celebration, really. I'm hoping that's the case. I mean, they live day to day, like not knowing what's gonna happen in their lives. I mean, like, I think I mean, we think that we have it bad, like not compared to what they have to go through. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to be okay with Trump taking actions that's only going to worsen things. And it's looking like we're honestly escalating with Russia. And I honestly don't think that that's going to be a good thing. So that was my little mini rant. Trump and Russia business ties. I mean, we'll see if it's a quid pro quo type situation as far as Trump taking sanctions off. It's looking like now with Syria that they're basically embittered now, and that may not happen. I mean, but maybe Trump will take away the sanctions to try and smooth things over. I don't know. Um, yeah, like this kind of question about our relationship with Russia is going back to Obama too, because of the supposed Russian reset. This idea that we were going to somehow revamp our relationship with Russia, and try and get to a place where we're more, at ease and peaceful with each other. And this was, why people were upset that Obama didn't want to arm Crimea. He would put sanctions on Russia over Crimea, but he refused to arm Crimea. Refused to attack Syria. Probably not so much related to the Russians with that, but still, I mean, at this point, Russia is kind of getting more involved, and as we are. But it's a total hypocrisy because like the Republicans, a majority of them were like upset over this whole thing, and now they kind of want to distance themselves from the whole Russia thing. There's like a few mavericks out there, supposed mavericks like John McCain, who want to be vigilant on the Russian investigation. But him and Lindsey Graham are the biggest cheerleaders of these Syrian airstrikes. So no, they're actually like big war hawks themselves. So I mean, if they're against Trump, I guess that's good, but not necessarily for the right reasons. And then look at Yemen and Somalia. I mean, they're enduring man-made famines. And Yemen in particular has a blockade from the Saudi Arabian military, and they're blocking food from getting in. And we're allies with Saudi Arabia, and we did a raid where we killed 30 civilians, and Trump is not giving them humanitarian aid. So, again, he does not care about civilian casualties. This is all a ruse, and this goes back as far back as George Bush Sr. and probably even before that. But George Bush Sr. would talk on TV about Saddam gassing children and these things, and I think it even turned out to not even be true. But like let's go with the argument that it is true. Okay, if that's the case, and you have people that are um, abusing international law in the Middle East, the lesson of Iraq is you don't go in and topple the authoritarian strongman, because you don't know what's going to come out of that Pandora's box. You don't know that terrorism is not going to rise as a result. And you're not going to know that until you actually do it. And that's why it's a detriment. I mean, and there's just no precedent according to international law. This is not me talking. This is Harvard law professors and experts that are saying that there's no basis for what Trump did, and even not on the international scale. Our Constitution is supposed to you're supposed to go through Congress to declare war, and I mean I don't even know at this point if that was a declaration of war, if you could call it that, but I think you could pretty easily interpret it as that, because you're attacking a government target again. This is not droning some terrorists in the desert somewhere. This is a Syrian airfield that apparently has coordination with Russian forces. So I think it's just, you can't call it the same thing. And I think, even if you didn't want to call it a declaration of war, you probably should have gone through Congress. And they probably would have rejected it, which is why Trump didn't go through Congress. We'll probably be sending more troops to Afghanistan too. Expect that. The New York Times reported a general requested a few thousand more troops. And what's our goal there now? Because our whole thing there was to take out Osama bin Laden and minimize the Al Qaeda dominance in the region, and we've done that. Now we're taking out the Taliban for God knows what, but we're doing that. And I mean, as soon as we leave, as soon as we take out whatever number of Taliban people, and not even touching the civilian lives that we might kill, once we leave, there will most certainly be Taliban resurgence or some kind of jihadist resurgence. But the thing with the Taliban is that they're more of a nationalistic group. They don't have so much goals to attack us here on the homeland. They're not ISIS in that way. So honestly, by going after the Taliban, it's probably only going to increase their hatred towards us. And I think that people in the military know this. I don't think that they're that dumb. And this all hinges, like, this is their business. This is their job. So of course they're going to want perpetual war. It's an obvious conflict of interest. I think we need some kind of body. It's supposed to be the UN, I guess, but we need something so much more effective at policing this kind of activity, where generals just advise the president. And of course, I mean, Obama probably questioned it so much more. I would imagine. I imagine there's times where Obama, just bended to the general's will. But I am very convinced Obama, based on the evidence, fought this kind of mentality much more than Trump is and will continue to. So the solution to these problems are mostly irrelevant with these people in charge. So, I mean, we're along for the ride. I mean, Trump is president until 2020 at the very least, and his cabinet is going to be in place until 2020, or they get fired, or whatever the hell is going on over there. There's like a whole feud between Bannon and Kushner. Kushner's his son-in-law, and Bannon's this like strand of alt-right and protectionism and anti-globalism, and he actually kind of has like decent views somewhat on foreign policy, go figure, because he wants to invest more here and not do like the nation building thing, whereas Kushner is viewed as the more globalist, elitist, I guess, type person. So the Trump camp is splintered in itself. I mean, like we have people, the population is very splintered, and there's so much political polarization. But that's happening in the Trump administration itself. Um, but I mean, we have to show our politicians on both sides what issues matter to us. Excuse me. The people want progressive change. Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders' bill that he's put forth, HR 676. Go on Justice Democrats. They have the petition, justicedemocrats.com/single payer, I believe is the URL. Um, there's no reason for Democrats to not support this. Period. There's no reason because what was the whole thing about Hillary, what she said about healthcare, and what the general idea was? We're going to improve upon Obamacare, and her proposal was the public option. Public option, maybe that's not that bad, but the problem with why Hillary, the problem with why she went that way is that's maybe what you get out of proposing Medicare for all. You don't start with the position that you concede to eventually. So what I'm saying is you start with the position that you want to get, the ideal position, right? And then after debate, maybe you go back and forth with Republicans for a while, and then you say, okay, maybe we'll do public option, and they agree to that. But she concedes right out the door. And this was a part of Obama's like half loaves doctrine, whatever. I mean, this whole like I'm gonna cave to Republicans before I propose what I want to do. That way, there's no way that they're gonna oppose it. Well, they opposed it anyways because honestly, let's be honest, because you're black, and there are a lot of racist people out there, especially in the Republican Party, and they didn't want anything to do with Obama. So this idea that Obama was going to get Republican support for caving to their positions is ridiculous. I mean, no Republicans voted on Obamacare, none. So he didn't pass uh, Medicare for all that way, single payer that way. When none of the opposition party voted, you couldn't get the Democrats to support Medicare for all back then. It's ridiculous. We have to make our politicians and our congressmen worry. They have to know that we are united behind changing the establishment. The establishment, of course, is the accepted mentality of certain issues amongst the majority of politicians, will say. So examples of this are the interventionist wars. There's just no option for peace anymore. The options that were presented are like the Trump wing, the Republican wing, where just anything goes. Whatever war crimes we commit, that's fine. We can do whatever. I mean, Trump famously said on Fox and Friends, we should take out the families of ISIS. So just taking the xenophobia and the war hawk ideology and not sugarcoating it in any way. And that's what the Republican Party has more or less become. I mean, not everyone is necessarily that gung-ho that they're willing to say such things, but more or less, yeah, they're for interventionist policies. And on the Democratic side, it's like they're for the same policies, essentially. I mean, Obama, upped the drone program that was started under Bush, and they're for doing that, except they're gonna say we want to spread freedom and democracy. They want to sugarcoat it as much as possible to make it palatable to the American people. I mean, and with the Syrian strikes again, I mean the Democratic leaders, Chuck Schumer said that this was the right thing to do. Nancy Pelosi said that the response by Trump was proportionate. I mean, for God's sake, proportionate response. So, Assad gasses people, kills around 100 people, We kill thousands of civilians all across the Middle East. We set up a worldwide torture regime, and that's supposed to be proportionate. And yeah, okay, I'm not supposed to connect those things, right? Oh yeah, how could you possibly do that? Well, context matters. I mean, like we can't just keep doing these things because there's dictators that are bad again. I mean, we have to learn the lesson of Iraq, and we have to understand that actions have consequences, and these things don't exist in a vacuum. Money in politics is a big one where there's just no rhetoric really from either side. It's always kind of a good election ploy that people will use, like, oh, I want to end corruption and take the dark money out of politics, as Hillary Clinton would say. So take the dark money out of politics. What that phrase essentially means is let's have more transparency. Let's not change anything so that corporations can buy whatever, but let's make it transparent so that we can see what they're doing. And that's like supposed to be where we're at, I think, but it's just not, because these things don't get widely reported. Holding Wall Street accountable. This is a problem on both sides too. With Obama, he didn't jail not one executive from Wall Street over the financial crash. Goldman Sachs is like the shadiest organization I could imagine. That these people used fraud as a business model, as Bernie Sanders said. And Steve Mnuchin, who was an employee at Goldman Sachs, he ran Key West Bank, which was known for just what's the word, foreclosing on like elderly people for very little offenses that they would do. Like they wouldn't pay back, sometimes in certain cases like a dollar or a cent, and they would get foreclosed on. And this was like a problem because Steve Mnuchin would do these robo signings. So he said in Congress that he didn't do that, but it turned out that was not true. Is there any consequence for that? No, of course not. Okay. The war on drugs is a pretty big one too, because there's just hardly ever anything said on either side about ending the war on drugs or doing anything to minimize the harm. Tulsi Gabbard proposed a bill to decriminalize marijuana. And who in the Democratic leadership is talking about this? Who of any of the big name Democrats? I mean, Tom Perez, head of the DNC, like who's coming out and saying we need to end the war on drugs, do all these things? Of course, the Republicans, Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, he wants to increase the war on drugs. So no hope for the Republicans on that side, which is kind of ironic because they're supposed to be the party of small government, right? But not apparently when it comes to putting substances in your body. And this is a lot to do with Big Pharma. They contribute to both sides of the aisle. Cory Booker gets massive money from Big Pharma. He's in New Jersey, and that's where a lot of these companies are stationed, actually. So this is what happens. And then climate change is honestly a big one, because there's a lot of talk on the Democratic side, but hardly any action. I mean, like, we couldn't even ban fracking in the Democratic platform. And the Paris Agreement, I mean, as good a step as it might be, it just wasn't enough. And I mean, like the oil companies, that they do contribute to both sides of the aisle there too. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, got plenty of money from them. And I mean, like, they just aren't pushing the rhetoric that they should be. They shouldn't cower in fear and just not point out that the solar industry is booming now and coal is dying. Trump wants to revamp coal, clean coal as it's called. the solar industry is thriving, and it's only going to get better if we subsidize them more. I mean, like we give subsidies to oil companies left and right. We give them billions of dollars, hundreds of billions. Then we only give about 3 billion or 4 billion to renewable energy. So you can't compete with that, and it has to be you have to speak out, and they just aren't doing that. I mean, like I can go out in the street, anyone can go out in the street and talk about the environment all day long, but we need the people that represent us to do that, and that's the whole point of representing the constituency, right? They're supposed to hear our needs and try to represent them in government. And I mean, as far as like with climate change and what Trump's doing by eliminating the EPA, we're limiting the number of jobs that we could have for people. The EPA may not be perfect, I know, but to reform it from the inside is going to be much more effective, I think, than any other option. Um, More generally, yeah, I mean, as I've been saying, we need to be more active at our local and state levels. We can do everything we can, but at the end of the day, like some people aren't just that they aren't going to change. So that's why you got to vote in your midterm elections. Try and get as many people in there that you think will represent you. And once they're in there, hold them accountable. It's not just getting them in there. You have to like follow what they're doing and really just um, say your concerns to them. And that's kind of what it comes down to.